There's no hiding from it. Generation Z is the future. There are future clients, future employees, and even the future business owners. And it's essential for any business that's looking to be around in the next 5, 10 years to really get good at speaking to Generation Z. But it's not quite as simple as just going onto the latest platforms, Snapchat, Instagram stories, and things like that. You need to really understand what they're about. Well, in this video, I sat down with Jake, who's the founder of Trndsttrs Media. They're a US-based Gen Z marketing agency helping brands to really future-proof and understand how to communicate with the next generation. So if you want your brand or business to stay relevant in the next 5, 10 plus years, you're gonna wanna see this one. We dive into everything from some of the common mistakes that brands have when trying to reach a Gen Z audience to how to really get clear on your messaging when trying to target Gen Z as an audience. Stick around. Hey guys, it's Tom here from Elevate Digital, and today I'm joined by Jake from Trndsttrs Media out of Kansas City. Thanks so much for joining us, Jake. Really appreciate this. So I've been following Jake and his team on LinkedIn for a while now. They're doing some incredible stuff around marketing to Gen Z. And I really want to kind of tap into your journey, Jake, as an entrepreneur, what you've been through, some of the challenges you face, but also Gen Z, right? And the big, because I think a lot of brands really struggle understanding Gen Z. And I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the kind of common mistakes that people make when trying to speak to them as an audience.
Yeah, that's a great question. And kind of that's the reason we exist as an agency is because we kind of saw what happened with millennials in the market.
Yeah.
A lot of brands and firms got kind of burned by millennials per se. Now you see a lot of bankruptcies because of that with very large brands. So you think about the average small to mid-sized business also having those struggles. And we saw that with millennials, and we know it's going to happen again with Gen Z, yet we're still on our heels about it. And I say we as in the majority of the brands out there today. There are a few winners and a few brands that have done things well, but the reality is if brands don't start to effectively map and launch executions around reaching Generation Z, they're going to be obsolete and they're going to have plenty of trouble over the next decade.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think this is the thing, right? Like Gen Z is the future. And I don't think a lot of brands have woken up to that yet. Like it's happening, it's here. It's not even the future, like it's now, right? They are the consumers of today and even the businesses of today. Like look at yourselves, right? And you see a lot of, I think, you know, especially within the Gen Z space, like there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial flair. And I think that comes from, I mean, you probably know this better than I do, but it seems like there's much more kind of self-expression. And it's like, you know, that people standing up and saying like, hey, we want to do our own thing here.
Yeah, certainly. We tend to identify Gen Z as the personal brands generation. Everyone, thanks to social media or as a result of social media, whether you look at it positively or negatively, everyone has their own sphere of influence, their personal brand built online through social media. And so because of that, how they approach certain situations and objectives is quite different. So when they're thinking about a career, they are subconsciously building in that personal brand. What is my lifestyle going to be like? What does my day-to-day look like? Is that going to be consumable? Is my audience going to enjoy that? And it's some of these slight nuances that end up impacting, you know, entrepreneurship or the side hustle era, which has taken a large part thanks to millennials, is now being passed on to Gen Z, where pretty much every person right now between the age of like 20 and 25 working at a big company is like has some sort of side hustle or side hobby that they're doing, which by all means, you know, go for it. But if you're an employer, if you're a brand, that creates plenty of opportunities for you. If you're an employer, that's quite concerning. And so yeah, Gen Z and their entrepreneurial spirit is, I think it's great for the market. I think it poses a lot of questions for a lot of employers.
Definitely. And what about you guys, Jake? Like, tell me about how you got started with the Trndsttrs. Obviously, there was a big. It sounds like you kind of recognized this very early on. Like there was a big problem there, right? That needed to be fixed and addressed. Is that where it came from? Is that where the kind of inspiration came from to start?
Yeah, certainly. I think the biggest thing was it kind of happened out of necessity. It wasn't like thought of as an idea. It wasn't like researched and then developed. It was essentially, you know, we started working with companies here and there just on the Snapchat platform. And this is when I was in high school. And then before I knew it, they were having us do all their website stuff and all their marketing efforts, trying to reach other young people because we understood them best. And then before I knew it, I was advising Noodles and Company on a strategy to reach young people. And I quickly kind of realized that, wow, this is needed in the market. And there's incredible agencies in the space and consultants and marketers and brand gurus and so on, but very few have a great understanding of our generation. And something I always reference is like computing power. Moore's law states that computing power doubles every 2 years, so that it accelerates drastically fast over time. Similarly, consumer behaviors do the exact same thing. And so the way the industry works right now is, you know, we're going to look at data sets from a Deloitte, from a Boston, from a McKinsey. Any of these are big research firms that are grabbing large amounts of data around Gen Z, even like Spotify. We're going to look at data sets. They're going to be a year old. They're not going to tell us the full picture. They're just going to tell us data of the questions we ask, not the questions that are posed by our actual end consumer and audience.
Yeah.
So the entire system of how we understand consumers is flawed. And it's our job to not only solve that and create a better understanding of Gen Z, but also launch initiatives towards them as an agency, actually doing the executions, because it's one thing to build the roadmap, it's another thing to put that action in place.
Very true. Very, very true. And what about like, because I noticed on your website, actually, you just mentioned there about the whole Snapchat thing. Like you guys started as a Snapchat brand. What was that? Like, how did that begin?
Yeah, great question. So me and a few buddies of mine, we had a Snapchat account and just started getting a lot of followers, and would just post stupid content on there, like doing fun, stupid high school things, right? And then we got approached by like businesses and restaurants and such to like advertise their products on it. Wow. So of course I was like 17 and I had never seen like a $300 check before. So I was all for it. I was like, okay, like I'm just going to post on Snapchat, I can make money. And so, you know, that's kind of how it started. And then it just evolved. Like I think a lot of people think it was started from like a Tai Lopez course by Gary Vee, or like was incubated by like some sort of education system, but it really just happened organically. And I think most of the best things tend to follow that same trajectory, where it happens at a market need, not like demand for it.
I really love that. Like, I think that's super powerful. Because like you say, I definitely, I recognize that there's a real kind of, you know, there's almost this kind of fashion thing around entrepreneurship at the moment, right? Like it's a cool thing to do. And like, I think the brands that really succeed well are the ones, like you say, who create it organically. Like you created the Snapchat account just to have fun, like you said. And I think when people do that, that's when people start to gravitate towards it. When you have these like, you know, businesses that are starting up out of this like, you know, desperation to be an entrepreneur, that's when you see it kind of going wrong. So that's such a cool story. So it literally just came from like you being approached from doing your own thing effectively.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, like, I think there's a lot of people that see market opportunity or like a trend and then want to chase that. And the reason we're called Trndsttrs Media is because we don't want to chase trends. We want to set them. We want to create new ones. Because if you're always chasing trends, you're never going to catch up to them, and there's going to be a new one before you know it.
Very true, very true. And I think that's a really powerful perspective, and something I noticed from your website as well. Like you're very much future focused, right? On like, where are we going? Like what's coming next? And again, I think it's something a lot of brands miss out on, right?
Totally. I think if you're looking for somewhat like an agency or a partner that's going to increase your sales through a 90-day window, and answer to the objectives of the CMO or to the board, you know, we're definitely not the right agency to work with. If you actually want to be around and in business and have grown significantly over the next, you know, 2, 5, 10 years, then we're the right partner. It's one of the things where it's like in chasing short-term sales, and we have our head down and we can't see forward, and we think a 2% sales growth is the end all be all and that we must be moving in the right direction, what we don't see is the cliff that we're actually running into. A lot of brands that's happening right now where they're making moves to reach other audiences that are simply going to be outdated or disrupted, or their consumer base is just going to evolve. And then they're going to be SOL. They're going to be completely shit out of luck and not able to adapt at that point because at a certain point it's gone too far. And so our answer to that potential problem is not to say burn all the boats and let's create a whole new brand of business. It's just, by God, can we just invest a few dollars to the future of our business and health and start connecting with younger consumers that are going to be lifelong customers. So that's just the mission and message we want to push. And that's where we fit in. I think we've definitely developed a better understanding of like where we fit in.
Awesome. And I'd love to get your perspective on like where you think the whole kind of agency and just marketing in general, in fact, like where it's headed. Because one thing I've noticed about you guys is that you are it seems like you're very dynamic, right, as an agency. And I guess you have to be like being future focused and working with Gen Z, because I think there's this real thing at the moment. You know, we see a lot of agencies where it's just like they treat marketing just as like an off the shelf thing, like, oh, you need some PPC or you need this or you need that. It's like, I just think it's crazy. Like, what are your thoughts around that and kind of more contextual advertising, right? Because I've heard you talking about this before and I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you for noticing that. I think very few do, even like clients. I think that, like you mentioned, like the off-the-shelf advertising I think it's really hot. And I think here's the beauty of it. It makes a lot of sense for the client because most clients, they just want to see like, what am I getting for my money? They care more about like deliverables and services than they do like actual results, which always baffles me. And then similarly, agencies, they want to be able to sell specific products that are templated, that they know their profit margin on, because it's a lot easier to manage, right? So I'm always definitely jealous of that model. I refuse to cave into that though, because I know the reality, and I think you know the reality as well. And anyone that's actually in marketing knows this, that like you can design a specific templated game plan, and you can work with the exact same client with the exact same structure in the exact same industry in the exact same market. It's still going to have to be different.
100%.
That's the reality of things. And so the model we follow is kind of like a team model, where we're going to project based on like billable hours and charge according to that. But we're just going to pair you with like some of our existing team members or ones that we're going to add on. And then let them kind of be a little bit more hands-on with it, because that allows us to dive quite deeper. We're less limited by like hour constraints and by multiple executions. And for us, we'd rather work with less clients at a much higher retainer for each, where we can dive a lot deeper and get greater results than we would the inverse of that, where it's working with a lot of clients doing just the same templated thing.
I really love that. Like, I love that approach so much because, we are going through a journey even still, like you said earlier, you got to constantly evolve, right? And in the past, we kind of fell into this bracket of like, okay, let's offer kind of templated off the shelf services to make it easy for us, to make it easy for people. But actually, like, if we're really going to keep the consumer in mind here and the businesses in mind, you can't really just operate like that anymore. Like, it has to be contextual, and it's almost like, if you keep things under this very limited spectrum, say like, oh, we're going to do an SEO campaign, we're going to do a PPC campaign, you're almost limiting your potential there. And like, really kind of thinking about how can we make the most impact and get the best results, like you say.
Yeah, no. And I think the biggest thing, like a great example of this is like social media. Like I have clients a lot of the time, they're like, well, like, what do we get? Like, are we going to do Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and LinkedIn and this? And I'm like, yes. And like, you have to take a second, because we can do social media. We could post some bullshit that we make on Canva and post it, but that's not doing social media the right way. I care a lot more about the results. Like, my favorite is like, how many times are you going to post per month? I don't know if you get that question. Like, we get that question a lot. And I'm like, however many times we need to get the results we want, and whatever the audience says. if we have to post 9 times per day to get the right results and because the audience loves it, then we're going to do so. But if the audience only wants us to post once a week, then let's do that. Like, why are we pandering to deliverables and services and executions instead of the end results? Like, are you working with us because we're going to check some boxes for you, and so your Facebook looks cool, so when you go home at night, you don't feel as bad, and when you read that headline, like, you feel less bad about it? No, like, we need to work together to actually work towards some vision and some end result and make that the North Star, and that can't happen if we box things in.
I love that. I'd love to get your perspective as well, and something that I've noticed, I think this is a big thing with Gen Z and especially with the kind of self-expression piece. And I also noticed it from your website and a lot of your content as well. There's a real kind of unique tone of voice behind it, right? Like, you're not afraid to just be yourselves, and I really love that and admire that. What kind of challenges, because I'd imagine, and you know, I face this challenge myself with some clients where, like, they are stuck in this very, very formal way of speaking, right? This kind of corporate communication style that is so dull, and it really puts people's guards up, in my opinion, a lot of the time, because they feel like, you know, if you're writing to them in that formal style, it's like they're getting a letter from the bank or something. Do you know what I mean? What kind of, how do you overcome that, and what kind of challenges have you faced there in that regard?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is the amount of business that we lose out on potentially just because of our voice, like blatantly not going to work with us. And then also, like, others that aren't going to like us from the get-go. And I used to have the wrong philosophy towards this, where I tried to pander. I tried to be something we weren't. So I tried to, like, band-aid on experience or wisdom or professionalism or all these caveats. But what I realized is, at the end of the day, if they're going to be working with us, it's because of our uniqueness and our creativity and our youth. And so what I've done since is we've really tried to triple down on, like, everything in who we are. Like, we're going to show our transparent, authentic selves 24/7 all the time. We're going to be totally honest and real, because the reality is, even if we're professional and trick some client into working with us, they're going to discover our style when we start working together anyway, and then leave, right? If they don't like it. So I always take the approach of, I would rather a lot of people hate me and a few people love me than I would just be liked by everyone, because being liked, it doesn't really lead to any long-term gain, in my opinion. I want to work with those select few that's like, I love what these guys and gals are doing, and I totally want to work with them. And that's going to lead to a lot of people disliking us, of which happens even in our hometown market here in Kansas City. But I'm more than happy with doing so.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that's such an incredible philosophy as well, not just for business, but for life as well, right? And it's crazy how many businesses we've worked with, and, you know, it's clear that they have, you know, some of them have been going for like 10, 20 years, and they've lost themselves in the process of trying to conform to keep others happy, right? And it's kind of like heartbreaking to see, like, these people that have been molded into something they're not, and they end up resenting their business because of it, you know? So I think that's, you know, really incredible insight that, you know, you've obviously had very early on, which is awesome. But I definitely think a lot more brands need to kind of be aware of that, and also be aware of, like, who they're speaking to now, right? Like we said earlier, Gen Z is the future, and I think that the whole tone of voice piece, like, is so important to be mindful of. I think it's something that's not kind of looked at enough. But I know you've got to head off in a couple of minutes, Jake. So one last question I just wanted to ask you. Well, two actually. I'm going to be greedy. One, what's the biggest mistake that you see brands making when they're trying to kind of appeal or speak to a Gen Z audience?
I think the biggest thing would be treating the medium as the answer. An example of this would be thinking if we run Instagram story ads, or if we post on Instagram, or if we post on TikTok, and that alone is the answer. Because we make decisions based on data of young people are on YouTube. Thus, if we go on YouTube, that makes us appeal to young people. That's an incorrect answer, and a really bad assumption. And so a lot of brands, that's the case. And that's where I think the biggest flaw is in thinking we're doing the right thing, but not setting up the right tracking and setting up the right KPIs to actually measure if it is working, and having an actual understanding going into it. And then I think I would add to that also like the context of the content. Like you said with the messaging, if you are off with the messaging, or if you have if there's a single smell of it being a promotion or advertisement, it's going to immediately be turned off. This is a very ad insensitive generation.
Mm.
So you got to be truthful and authentic with people, and you also got to be real. And if the copywriter writing all this content does not understand the lingo of the young people, then it's not going to hit it.
Yeah. So I think you've just kind of answered it there, but that was going to be my last question. On the flip side of that, what's the kind of the one most important piece of advice that you could kind of give to people if they are trying to communicate to Gen Z?
Yeah, I would definitely say the messaging, but I'd also say just actually, I guess it would be actually understanding them. We like to read things. It's like learning anything, right? It's like we like to think we have a good understanding of it, but then like I think I know Spanish a little bit, but if I go to Spain right now, I'm not like I'm going to do horribly. Like I just know. A lot of people don't know that when it comes to Gen Z. They learn a few things, a few tips and tricks. They have discovered the entire language. In reality, that's not the case, and so it's of that notion of like we think we're doing well, we think we know it, but in reality, we haven't actually tested that, and we look like a sore thumb in the market essentially.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so true. And there's this real, I've caught myself doing this so many times as well, where you're kind of, you read all this information. It's like you read a book and you try and find out about your customer that you're targeting. And it's like, wait, why do I not just speak to them? Yeah. And I see so many people doing that. So much research, so much money spent on research, but they don't actually just start the conversation or like, just engaging with people like yourselves, for example, right? And just actually speaking to you. Like it's crazy. And I think that's really, really valuable. So that's awesome, Jake. So look, I know you got to shoot off, so I really appreciate your time. If people want to get in contact with you, I'll drop a link in the description anyway, but where can they find you? Like what's best to kind of reach you on LinkedIn or Snapchat?
I would say LinkedIn for sure.
Okay.
Snapchat works too, but we'll save that for later conversations.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I'll drop the link to Trendsetters in the description of the video. Jake, thanks again. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much. See you.
Cheers.